How to invest in liabilities properly. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, considering I'm anti-liabilities, I'm anti-expenses, especially at the infancy of your career. I believe you should invest, stack up assets that will then pay for your liabilities in return. In fact, that in and of itself is a strategy. Assets pay for your liabilities, not income. So let's do a little bit of financial crash course before we move on. What is an asset? What is the liabilities? Liabilities, or what are liabilities? In simple terms, an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Accountants will call it expenses. So an asset is an income generating substance, while a liability is an expense, is something that takes away income. For instance, your car is a liability, your wages and salaries are liabilities, your rent are liabilities. But if you want to get logical and you want to look at it from an enlightened perspective, there are liabilities which I've just mentioned that can help contribute towards asset production. We'll discuss that to an extent, to a great extent at the latter end. But still on the financial crash course, liabilities. You do not pay for your liabilities with income. You pay for your liabilities with assets. So you do not borrow money. When you receive a paycheck, when you receive your salary, when you receive something you exchange your time for, it shouldn't be spent buying jewelries or luxury items, which are wonderful, by the way. I do not condone luxury items. I do not condone the fact you want to buy something nice for yourself. I do not condone the fact you want a nice vacation for your family. But what I do condone is going that route when you cannot afford it. Going that route when you do not have the equivalent of income generating assets. Immediately you receive your paycheck, it should be invested towards income generating assets. And I know what you're thinking. What asset do I dump my money in? I want to invest, but anytime I put my little dollars in cryptocurrency, it vanishes. Of course it would. You're investing in something you do not properly understand. And guess what happens to people who act that way? They lose. One of the laws of gold: before you make an investment, before you send your gold on an errand, make sure you understand the route, make sure you understand the destination, make sure you understand what you're getting into, or you seek out men who have a thorough experience in that regard. So you're defaulting the laws of gold. You're erring in the opposite direction of the laws. And guess what happens to people who break laws? They get punished. So that's exactly why you lost your money. So let's talk about the regional concepts, the emphasis of tonight's discourse, which is investing in liabilities. If you're smart enough, you would have seen, why am I getting my tenses mixed up? You would have identified what I call a walking contradiction in my initial listing for liabilities. I said rent, car. Rent in and of itself is a liability that helps produce. So once you rent a place for the sole purpose of business, it's a liability that enhances income production. Your car and the car maintenance is a liability that facilitates production. You understand? So that's something we are going to discuss at a great extent. How to invest in liabilities without feeling guilty, and how not to go overboard. Because once people are given access to do something they once considered degenerate, they misuse it. I recall for years I've never spent time watching movie. I consider it very foolish and degenerate. I am always focused. I have things to do. I considered it a waste of my time. But once I got a Netflix subscription, at first I used it judicially. I saw historical documentation. I saw things that could not towards history. Some NYPD, some CIA investigation, something along that lines. Then I abused it, watching movies that has no bearing in my destiny. Then I had to cancel the subscription. So it's the same thing with you. Given access to liabilities, you might go overboard and buy things that doesn't correlate to the business, that doesn't correlate to income generation. So in today's video, I'll give you 3 liabilities I consider an investment. What is an investment? Something laid up for the sole purpose of return. Something you give up for the sole purpose of returns, either monetary or otherwise. So the first one you need to invest in is experience. And this I consider the first because I want to have enough time to elaborate on this concept. Experience. Experience comes to broaden your horizon, to open you up to possibilities within your screen, beyond just your frame of reference. Experience. I come from a very humble background, and I say humble not to insult my parents, but they give up every single thing to get us to this level. So that's not the point I'm trying to highlight. I'm not one of those influencers who would try and paint their parents or paint their situation in a negative light. No. For the sole purpose of illustration, listen to the story. Don't make judgments. Came from a humble background, and to the point where I can spend millions, thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars without stress. Is actually the grace of God. But I noticed something. I was always penny pinching, not out of stinginess, but from the idea of what I considered luxury. I was operating from the standpoint that spending $100, $200 on my assistant's flight ticket is a lot. Rather, she go by road. Not until I traveled somewhere and I met this lady who came in a G-Wagon. We were friends for a while, and on those sheets, I asked her, how did you get this G-Wagon? Oh, my business. please, no business on a bayou and no amount of influencing gets your G-Wagon. After much pressure, she confessed that a man gave her the car for a night. Please understand that someone out there has 400 grand to give a lady for a night. Please understand. Don't just wave it away. 400 grand. Not on bottles, not on luxury clothes, not on items to post on social media such that it improves his social standing. $400 given out for a night. Now, it broadened my horizon. That is something. I'm there trying to penny pinch and considering $100, $200, $500 a lot. Although I have much more, and there are people with this kind of wealth. So that activity opened my mind, it broadened my horizon. Also, when I traveled the other day, I was with a guy and we spent about 50 grand on Airbnb for 2 weeks. So the total cost amounted to 50 grand. That experience in and of itself encouraged me, it provoked me to make more. Now, this is the balance. I'm not encouraging this competition mindset. I'm not encouraging the idea that you need to break the bank and afford certain reality which is not your experience and do things out of your means. No, that's way beyond the point I'm trying to purport. I do not encourage envy. I believe in the law of process. I believe even those individuals were not born with wealth. For the least, there was sometimes even when they were broke, there was a time where they could not make such expenses. So I believe I'm in that season at the time, and I believe I too would grow. So this is not to encourage competitive mindset or anything of that sort. Take note. I try as much as possible to introduce the balance whenever I give a concept as nuanced as this. I understand I have a very huge platform and majority would want to take advantage of this situation and appeal to their loss. I could see some of you getting excited because this is a direct teaching that appeals to that desire to buy things you cannot afford. Yes, if NS said it so, and he's a very smart guy, so I believe I should. You should not, sir. You should not. Do not, sir. Do not. So that's the first thing. Invest in experience, travel, see ideas. Exposure is a deadly as well as the double-edged sword. It can create, on one hand, it can destroy. A lady gets exposed to a certain quality of life for 2 nights. She comes back. So a degenerate of an apartment infested with all kinds of insects, vowing to herself never to return. And that begins the journey of a prostitute. Someone who was a church-loving girl transitioned from a God-fearing lady to a whore. Why? Because of 2 nights. So exposure on one hand can destroy, it can also create. Once you approach it with the right mindset, you will gain optimal outcome from that experience. The second thing you need to invest in is relationship. I can spend days on this one, relationship. And not the kind you would think. Do not take rich people out to dinner. They can afford the dinner. They can afford the birthday parties. They can afford whatever gift you're trying to conjure, you're trying to procure. It's their reality. They are rich. That's why you have the desire. That's why you are able to give them such. Can you spend the exact same amount you would give your boss on gifts to your brother, for instance? Exactly. So it's not the monetary amount. We only give people what we believe they are worth. So the fact you are willing to spend 100 grand on a watch for this individual, it means he's way beyond that item. Way beyond, sir. So the relationship I encourage you invest in are the ones coming up, the younger generation. There are 3, 4, 5 individuals. You start taking care of them, you pay their fees. And the right way to do this is to not just hand out finances, communicate love. Do not just pay school fees. Do not just give out alms. You speak to this person that, no, I know you just lost XYZ. You just lost a loved one. Everywhere seems desolate. But my friend, it's in pain that great men are built. You can either allow pain break you or you rise from pain and use it to do something good. XYZ lost his father, and now he has $1 trillion conglomerate. E.T., the motivational speaker, ate out of the trash. He lived in abandoned buildings. In fact, that story is what he shares. That is what is inspiring. That is what is motivating about his life. You too can turn your pain to something good and to encourage this person. Daily feedback. Of course, you do not do it every day to avoid the creation of an entitlement mentality. Once in a while, you instill them the sense of vision, the sense of purpose. That's why anything other than that is where you have situations where you invested in someone, you help this person get from point A to point B. He turns back to stab you. He turns back to harm you. There's nobody you would encourage, follow up, discipline, correct when it needs to be. Hey, you did XYZ, I'm going to punish you for it. But no, it's out of love. Yes, he might hate you for the moment, but there will be a healthy respect. Because if someone loves you, he's more likely to hurt you. Because men would offend those they love before those they fear. So once you know, if I offend this person, he's going to stand on business, you're less likely to take that action. Something just came to my mind now, but best relationship. The younger people are dangerous because the rich people, you've seen their future, you've seen the extent of their wealth. You cannot come to a person's life when he's already established and claim mistake. It's impossible. It's impossible. So mind how you treat people. Some of the guys I offer help, some of the children who are under my scholarship program, I say to the people I place them under, because I don't have the time to take care of XYZ needs. I said, mind the way you treat these ones, because a day will come in your life when you come arrayed with all kinds of vessels. Now they are great, and you come claiming a stake in their life, and they say, if I'm NS I know, XYZ I know, who are you? And you know what happens when you can't identify yourself. So mind the way you treat people, invest in relationship, it will prove beneficial. The third one is invest in books, knowledge. Knowledge is a liability, but it can, like the car analogy, it can facilitate production. The difference between you and I, the difference between the person you admire and you is knowledge, what they know. Every business you're failing at, someone else is succeeding. The difference is not the business. The difference is the person behind the business, what he knows, his strategy for advertising, his knowledge on honor, humility, ambience, content creation, content dissemination. All of these concepts plays a role as touching life and destiny. So knowledge, I can't recall who said, it is chiefly through books we intercourse with superior minds, them pouring their soul to ours. So invest in knowledge and you'll be fine. If you notice, all of these concepts I just stated, there is no logical correlation between the concepts and your bank account. Unlike assets, which are rental properties, the revenue goes directly to your account. But this doesn't have a logical correlation between your account and the concept, but it would facilitate income generation. Experience broadens your horizon to push for more, to strive for more. Relationship is therapeutic in and of itself. You feel good. Make reference to my video on purpose. Why people do things. This desire that your life is counting, you're making impact. Say if the person you're raising becomes a billionaire, you benefit not just financially, but from the thoughts. You raise the billionaire, and you forever be part of the story. And when I mention financially, I understand I'm addressing poor individuals. So when I say invest, you're expecting him to pay you back in monetary terms. But once you hit a certain threshold of finances, you observe it no longer works that way. Like the analogy I gave in my previous video, you do not see things based on what you pay for, but based on what you receive. I'll link my previous video to this. What was it called? I can't recall. I'll link it to this video. It's very helpful. But there might not be any logical correlation, but believe in yourself and you'll be fine. As always, my friends, pleasure speaking to you. I'll see you in the next one.